I would now like for our panelists to briefly introduce themselves.
My name is Ignatius Chirchir. I am an electrical engineer by profession, and I work for the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority as a senior energy efficiency officer. Looking forward to the deliberations.
My name is Ruth Kagwima. I'm the business manager at Kenya Flower Council. I'm looking forward to a great interaction and engagement.
Hello everyone, my name is Peter Waweru. I work as a technical advisor for GAZ and a project called Project Development Program, which is a key pillar of the German Energy Solution Initiative, where we collaborate with the C&I sector to pre-develop decarbonization projects within energy efficiency, renewable energy and heat supply, and looking forward to the conversation.
Good afternoon. My name is Fiona Magomere. I'm a grid control engineer with Kenya Power. Like Kathy said, I'm also an enthusiast for energy matters, efficiency, sustainability, and access. Happy to be here and looking forward to the conversations you're going to have this afternoon.
And just to kickstart the conversation, and on top of the background we now have on the challenges that exist to really understand why is energy efficiency important for the industry, and also looking at it from a whole, from the energy system perspective. Why do we actually need energy efficiency? So my first question will go to Fiona. So in this case, we'll have ladies first. And really just to understand, and like you said, from your background working with the utility as well, why is it crucial for companies to look at energy efficiency, and what does that mean? What is the ripple effect for the utility as well?
Think about it. Energy efficiency means using more to do, using less to do more, right? Yeah. So if industries and even from a personal perspective, if you're more efficient, it means you're saving a lot, not just finances but also resources. If an industry who is think about an industry like a steel industry, cement factory, these are energy intensive companies. And if they implement energy efficiency measures in their factories, it means they're reducing their bills, first and foremost. Secondly, they are also helping to reduce the carbon footprint. So using being efficient means it's also a trickle-down effect. It's not just about what they can do for themselves. They're looking to be sustainable. So being energy efficient serves that purpose. And then if you look at from the perspective of the grid, for instance, we have a lot of industries based at the coast. And the coastal part of the country, the kind of generation we have there is thermal generation, which has a lot of emissions. So if these industries that are centralized there are efficient, for instance, it means they will not have to generate all that energy. Being efficient means they will use less, and it also means that we won't need to generate that much power at that level, which is also costly. And you know about the pass-through cost to the smallest customers. So efficiency means saving a coin, and also there is the impact on the environment. So efficiency is good for everyone, not just for industry, even for the grid.
We will go to Peter. And really the question is, if we look at the general landscape, we actually have, and we can use the example of renewable energy because the two subjects are really interconnected, but we have tens of companies, if not hundreds, of companies that are working in solar as engineering, procurement, construction contractors. We do not have, for some reason, as much interest on energy efficiency. Why do we not have as many ESCOs? Of course, there are many or multiple technical reasons, but also for some reason, the interest, which of course could be driven by the market. So the question to Peter is, what benefits companies get when they effect energy efficiency measures, and how does that give them a competitive edge?
Thank you, Kathy, for that question. Of course, you're right. When you look at the general market, of course, solar captive power is something that is very clear. To gain a competitive edge, of course, energy cost is one of the main OPEX. Yeah. So if you can find a way to reduce any shilling or coin there, then it gives you a competitive edge. So that's where we start. So when you look at, so Kathy mentioned something to do with solar. There's a very strong case why it's very easy for many facilities to consider maybe captive solar in terms of as a means of reducing that energy cost. But of course, there's something else that is hidden, which is the energy efficiency that is mostly not very visible to other people. And what I can say is, of course, even before you go to implementing solar solution, it's always, we always advocate for start with the from energy conservation and then energy efficiency, and then you do the renewable. The reason why it's because even now when you go to maybe size a solar PV system, you're going to look at the energy demand that you have, and that is going to contribute to the overall capex of the solar PV. So if you start from the energy efficiency, then in the long run, if you're looking towards to get a captive solar solution, then you've already reduced your peak demand. Yeah. So that's an initial step to look at it in terms of why energy efficiency is an important first step, even before you even look at going to renewables for your facility. Maybe something else I can mention, and because we're having this conversation since in the morning, we've been looking at the peak demand. Like you notice even from the statistics that we have nowadays, we're almost approaching 3,000 megawatts. Yeah, from the recent statistics report that was given, so around 2,200 and something there. I can't remember. It was in October. So when you introduce energy efficiency measures within your facility, you're also alleviating some of this peak demand from the grid, and it's a complete whole maybe ripple effect up to the grid level. Yeah. So you're not just helping your facility to mitigate on these energy demand, energy costs, but also you're helping the whole the grid as a whole in terms of the energy distribution, and also just alleviating that distribution cost and every other thing included there. So that's one thing I can say. And then when you look at energy efficiency, there's so many ways to look at it. So we have very simple housekeeping rules that you can bring on board to be competitive, and some of them just start from maybe just having switch off policies, yeah, within your facilities. Very low but very high returns, and you can be able to just introduce maybe simple maintenance solutions, and then you can be able to actually reduce on cost. So when I look at energy efficiency, there's so many areas that facilities can look into that can give them a competitive edge, and not only just looking at the simple low-hanging fruits, like our first speaker spoke here. Most people go for the low-hanging fruits. There's a reason behind that. It's because they have availability of resources, but it's also the quick wins. They have to spend less, maybe resources to it. But what I'm saying also, of course, if you look at the bigger picture, if you're willing to take the risk, there are some opportunities that are there. Of course, high capex, but very high good returns. Yeah. So it's just a matter of balancing both the investment and the overall cost, and that can give you a very big boost in terms of competitiveness. So that's what I have.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And that's an interesting perspective as well that you've brought out in terms of some of the measures are more even behavioral, like the switch off policy that you mentioned. Sometimes it's not necessarily around an equipment, but can really be down to the everyday choices that the staff or teams in companies make. And next, of course, one of the recent interesting things that I'm sure we all would be keen to hear is around the recently gazetted energy management regulations, which have been available since February. And based on this new regulation, a question to Ignatius, right? And on what regulatory incentives are driving or could drive energy efficiency investments, especially looking at some of the revisions that have been recently made.
Thank you for that question. So as she has rightly put, we have a new energy management regulations of 2025, which is like an improvement basically of the existing regulations and maybe additions as a result of the enactment of the Energy Act 2019. So in these new regulations, besides the usual activities that we did in the the previous regulation of 2012 of facilities conducting energy audits as a mandatory requirement, so that one has been a key incentive in the energy efficiency space as far as investment is concerned, because it has opened up the energy auditing space. People have been able to invest as energy auditors have been able to get job opportunities in terms of conducting energy audits, and also the facilities as a result of that regulatory requirement have been able to invest on energy efficiency practices within their facilities. So that one was brought up from the previous regulations, but in the current regulations, some of the key incentives that we see will spur the energy efficiency in the sector is the introduction of energy savings credits, trading in energy credits. So that one will be a game changer actually for sure, because we have in developed countries where we benchmarked, it was something that enabled facilities to benefit from investing in energy efficiency. So that is a new scheme that we will be rolling out in the near future. Of course, besides having the regulations, now the main challenge is normally the implementation of the regulation to its fullest, which normally comes also and requires some inputs and time within the space and the sector. So besides that, also we have other things like the awards that we normally recognize people who are doing good, industries that are doing better in terms of energy efficiency. So we have the award of energy management compliance certificates to facilities that are doing well, that have gone through all the processes of the energy management regulations. And that one normally gives the companies a good publicity and recognition both locally and internationally.
Thank you very much. And speaking of awards, recently this week we visited a company that had an award from the CAM award, that's the Energy Management Awards, and they had something on a plaque behind their desk on electricity savings. So really, there's multiple ways, including creating such competitive platforms that companies can actually benefit or have some incentive to put in and share what their savings are. So next, we would like to hear from Ruth from the Kenya Flower Council. Kenya Flower Council has been an industry or an interesting, let's say, sector and flower farms in general, especially on renewable energy. They have done a lot, and the sector has been a front runner. So we really would like to hear what the role of awareness is. Maybe sharing learnings from what has happened in renewable energy, and also coming into efficiencies in order for the players, in this case flower farms or any other, to be able to instill a drive for getting savings on energy efficiency.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. Today, as I was having lunch, it was very interesting. I met a wonderful lady, and I told her I'm from Kenya Flower Council. And she was like, "What are you doing here?" And it's unfortunate because the floriculture is one of the heaviest consumers of energy in this country. We consume a lot of energy in pumping water, in some actually of the flowers that are grown have to be lit because they have a length of hours that they have to be under lighting. So the floriculture is a very huge consumer of energy. And I know we have great players here. If maybe you have not really thought of it, the floriculture is a big, big client of energy. But coming to your question, just coming to share a bit from the background and from the floriculture, one of the greatest challenge that we have realized is there's very little awareness. 2 weeks ago, I've been to a flower farm and just a good interaction on energy matters. And yes, they are doing so much to try and preserve energy, whether it's automation, LEDs. But in terms of efficiency, I would give example. This farm is getting water from maybe Lake Naivasha. And the kind of pump that are being used there are quite very heavy. But a question like what do this pump operate in terms of efficiency? What is the level? And totally they can't answer that question. And I feel there's a huge gap with the solution givers that they have a lot of what is being done every day in terms of technology, in terms of advancement, in terms of so much is being happening. But to the end consumer, there's very little that they are aware of. And if we are able to close this gap, then the uptake will be great, but also the ripple effect that we are looking at in terms of cost saving, in terms of, reduction, in terms, and even just generally what we're using as a grid, that will go a long way. So there's a huge gap in terms of information. And I think one of the suggestions would maybe to take the direction of solar, say the sustainable energy. Our sector was among the very first to take up solar. And if not 90%, most of the flower farms that we go to, at least they have solar. The percentage of energy being used might vary, but at least they're aware of this. And I feel every player in this space, we have a big, big, big challenge to just bring this awareness to the people and to the sector. So, Kathy, that is what I would do.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. And again, there's the recurrent theme of a behavioral change. So you have an example where a facility, a flower farm might have solar PV installed, but for whatever reason, a pump is run at night when it could have been run during the daytime hours to take advantage of the cheaper energy that is available. And in relation to that also, Ruth, you mentioned an interesting point around knowledge and awareness and how important this is, and links into one of the things that Engineer Chirchir will mention or present next. So in terms of equipment that, let's still use the example of the flower farm, pumps and motors that are being used, and just for the facility to understand what is the impact of oversizing or undersizing this equipment on their total energy cost, on the cost of producing their flowers or whatever it is, per stem or whatever, or whatever the case might be. So relating to that, one of the things that came out from, I believe, regulatory impact assessment on what can be improved in the industry is awareness, right? Because for the facilities, they are carrying out energy audits, but they are not translating to, more of these measures being implemented. And to have a better understanding of that, we will have a brief overview of about 5 minutes of what has changed or what is new in the Energy Management Regulations 2025. Please help me welcome Engineer Chirchir.
So normally the process of developing regulation, I'll be assuming most of us know, just in case you don't know, it normally starts with conducting a regulatory impact assessment, which justifies or brings out the comments or reasons why you need that regulations, or if the regulations existed, if you need to enhance in what direction, whatever was in the regulations, if there are some that needs to be omitted and some that needs to be added. And most of those aspects comes from the industry as a result of the regulatory impact assessment. So that one was done for the Energy Management Regulations of 2012, and it informed a lot of aspects that was included in the new energy management regulations, which I'll be capturing briefly about them. So my outline of the presentation is a little bit of the Energy Act on what it talks about the promotion of energy efficiency and the mandate it has given the authority on that role. Of course, we drive our powers and maybe roles from the Energy Act as the authority. So I'll be using the authority to mean EPRA. So in the morning, somebody said there are people who say EPRA, others say EPRA. So for me, I use the authority most of the time. So meaning the same regulator, we're talking of the energy regulator. So I'll talk a bit about the energy efficiency benchmarks, which I'm very sure most of us here have had an interaction with, because recently we tried to set some sector-based benchmarks for the country. And then, of course, I'll dive into the energy management regulations, the additions that have come in play, and whatever we will be trying to implement in the coming few months. So, as far as the Energy Act of 2019 is concerned, it gives the authority the mandate to promote energy efficiency and conservation in the country. So, if you check section 200 to section 202, that is where basically I'll be focusing my talk about. So it gives the authority the mandate to designate energy consuming facilities, and then development of energy benchmarks, which we'll be talking about, and of course the development of minimum energy performance standards for appliances, which is basically targeting the households. So we're trying to also to improve efficiency in the household level. So the first two is addressing the commercial and the industrial setup. So as a result of that, we have two regulations. That is the Energy Management Regulations of 2025 and the Appliances, Energy Performance and Labeling. So if you've gone to the supermarkets, you will see the refrigerator with the label. I am literally the person behind that label. So it's trying to portray the efficiency of the appliance and communicate to the public on what to do in terms of making informed choices as far as energy efficiency is concerned. So for that, there's a campaign we normally say, the more the stars, the more the savings. So you purchase the higher star rated appliance. So for the energy benchmarks, there was a study that was done, I think in 2023 or 2022. My boss is here, he'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. So we were trying to set the sector benchmarks for some selected facilities in the country. So we did some study for tea factories, cement, I think also flower farms were included, hotel industry. So, and we arrived at some common threshold where we wanted to inform them on how they can benchmark or compare themselves with their peers within the country as far as energy consumption is concerned. So the aim is to recommend the minimum required energy use index for selected categories of facilities. So these benchmarks will inform the energy savings credits, the trading scheme that we'll be introducing. Because the people who will surpass those benchmarks, they'll be given energy saving certificates. And they'll have some credits they can sell to someone who did not comply or meet that benchmark. So we are seeing this one as a game changer, as a key introduction in these energy management regulations. So besides that aspect of the benchmarks and maybe some other introductions, these were some of the key requirements from the previous regulations that were maybe carried forward also to the new regulations. So any energy consuming facility or a designated facility for that matter, if I say designated facility, I mean a facility that consumes more than 180,000 units per year. So the regulations explains that it is mandatory for them to conduct an energy audit. They should have an energy management policy, have an energy manager or engage the services of an energy manager, have an energy management team. And then of course, after doing the energy audit, there is that energy management implementation plan. And then another key requirement now is in the energy consumption data. So for the energy consumption data, it requires the facility to keep records of electricity consumption, fossil fuel, and production. That is actually what assisted us in developing the benchmark. Because from here, you're able to compare the production vis-a-vis the energy being consumed. So that one will also enable the facility to develop their own internal benchmarks. So as the authority, we will develop the global benchmarks, that is the country benchmark for a specific sector, and then now it will be the owners of the facility to try and also do the self-improvement and self-checks within the facility by developing their own benchmarks. And that one can only be possible if they have the records, the production data, and the energy consumption for the period of time. So in the new regulations, there are some additions that have been mentioned. You've heard about them. So the key additions, of course, are in the energy performance benchmarks, where now we'll be having the issuance of energy saving certificates and also the energy trading scheme. So, and then also for the new licenses categories, we've introduced licensing of energy managers. From the previous regulation, it was upon the facility to just appoint an energy manager. But as a result of the regulatory impact assessment, we realized facilities were not able to implement some of these energy conservation measures because they didn't have qualified person within the facility to guide the facility on the implementation. So that one necessitated the issue of the authority licensing an energy manager and requiring the facility to engage the services of an energy manager. So, and then also we have another category of an energy or an energy auditor call for energy measurement and verification. So that one also, from the previous regulation, it was a bit silent about it on the aspect of monitoring, measurement of the energy savings. So this one also will play a key role in terms of figuring out if the facility saved the energy that was like projected from the energy audit, and also if eventually they'll be awarded the energy saving certificate and be able to trade in the energy savings in the energy trading scheme. So also we have an introduction of an ESCO, energy service company. We'll be licensing energy service companies. Actually, in the country we have them. We have energy service companies, but not registered by the authority. So the reason for doing that now is to try and improve the implementations of the ECMs resulting from the energy audit. So this one also will be a key aspect which I'd want to focus more in the next slide here. So ESCOs, for you to be an ESCO, you need to have an energy auditor category CMVP who will be able now to do the verification of those measurements of the energy saved within the facility. So their role will be mainly designing, procuring, and financing energy efficiency related projects within a facility, and also the development and the management of the ECMs. So actually, ESCO, they can come to the facility, do an energy audit, and give you a recommendation that can be deemed as a bankable recommendation by the facility. So they can choose to invest in and see value in money if they invest in that recommendation. So the mode of operation will be energy performance contracts between facilities and the ESCOs. So in conclusion, so what I've talked basically is about our mandate as the authority defined clearly by Energy Act on Section 200 to 202, specifically touching on the energy efficiency promotion of activities around energy efficiency in the country. So for the benchmarks, we will be setting, of course, we started the process. We've set some sector-based benchmarks for some designated facilities. Within the few coming years, we'll roll out to other facilities and try to come up with the global benchmarks where the facilities can use to compare themselves with their peers. And then, of course, the new energy management regulations, which we will still be doing a lot of awareness about them to the facilities. So we have now the introduction of new licenses and the energy savings trading scheme. And something that might be very important now is the years of implementation of the measures. The previous one was talking about 3 years. At least this one, we've added another year for you to be able to implement those capital intensive kind of ECMs. My colleague here, Peter, was talking about some recommendations can be like low-hanging fruits, others will be capital intensive. So as a result of the regulatory impact assessment, we found out there are some key ECMs that are capital intensive and facilities were not able to implement them within that 3-year period stipulated in the previous regulation. So having an extra 1 year, we see that one as something that will enable facilities to uptake the capital intensive kind of ECMs within the facility. That is the end of my presentation. I hope it answers most of your questions rather than maybe making you ask more, but you're welcome to ask any question if you have.
I just have one question on the issue of energy saving credits and whether there are any regulations around that and the trading of the same. If I generate some ESCs, where would I be trading them? Or what is the benefit of those? Maybe that's the only question that I had on that.
I come from a telecom industry. I don't know whether you already set benchmarks for that sector. Secondly, is about the licensed energy manager. So assume a company that has distributed facilities. Would that imply that we need to have several energy managers for these facilities, or just one manager will do?
My name is Julius Ryungu. I want to take this opportunity to thank EPRA for really looking at this particular area of energy efficiency. I drafted the first rules in 2006, but then ERC refused to take them. I'm glad now they have been implemented, and you are thinking about even changing them. Now, since 2015, I would have been interested for you to tell us what effect has this particular measure, these regulations had in the energy consumption in the country. Because the idea of introducing them was that there will be an audit every year for every particular installation that has been classified for that purpose. And then there will be penalties. Other measures will be recommended by EPLA, and they'll again be reviewed to ensure that all those particular industries continue performing what is expected of them. Simply because if you can cut out energy efficiency and conservation, it is going to reduce the burden on the energy suppliers and the investments that is required in the industry. It is more or less trying to create another power station, but without building it. So I would like to know what is your experience since 2015? Thank you.
And actually, it's my lucky day because my boss is here. So if there are tough questions, I'll be happy to delegate upwards. So, so for the energy saving scheme, that is the trading scheme. The first question by Edward Njoroge, you're asking where will you be able to trade them? So we will be able to set a platform. So that one, for sure, at the moment, we are yet to develop it. As I mentioned earlier, making the regulations is another part. Implementing it fully is another aspect. So for sure, there'll be a little bit of an adjustments within the existing frameworks to accommodate the new changes. And we will set a platform which we will roll out. Of course, we will have the stakeholder participation included or involved in the development of that platform. So we will definitely come up with where you'll be able to trade on the energy saving credits. So for the telecom industry benchmarks, so we started with the key sectors within the authority within the country, that we selected based on the energy audits and the impact of the previous regulations. So definitely we'll be rolling out for other sectors within the country. So for the moment, we have not set the benchmarks for the telecom industry, but that one is on the way, and my boss here will be able to tell you when. I'll give him some few minutes to explain about or add something on my responses. So for the licensed energy managers, the way the regulations explain them, it says a designated facility should engage or must engage the services of an energy manager. So one energy manager can serve several facilities, like ESCOs, for example. Energy service companies also, they can be able to serve as the role of energy managers within several facilities. So if you have what we normally do from the previous regulation, one facility, as long as it's consuming 180,000 kilowatt hours, fits to be a designated facility. And that facility should engage the services of an energy manager, even if it is one franchise, like having many, but it is treated separately as an independent unit. So you should be able to have energy manager, have an energy management committee within that facility. So engineer, that yours was a tough one, and I definitely was not there in 2015, but I'll be able to pick from what I did within the authority from that period. So from the studies that was done, the impact of the regulations, the 2012 regulation, so there've been an allusion that as a result of implementation of energy efficiency measures, it saves up to around 20 megawatt of a power plant in a year. So, and we were projecting like up to 2030, the implementation of these regulations. Using that approach, we'll be able to save up to 100 megawatt of a power plant that could have been installed by 2030. So maybe my boss, Dr. Engineer Felix Musonye here, can be able to add something on that.
One, for the savings that you would get if we implemented the regulations since 2012. They are published online, actually. We have regulatory impact assessment. If you just Google that and then you add the word Kenya, energy management, you'll see it. And we gave a snapshot of what is supposed to be saved. We sampled when we were doing the study. And just before I sat down, Engineer Mwari was here. He was part of the team that did the study. We sampled 28 facilities where we did an in-depth analysis of how they've been running. And then we projected that at a confidence level of 95%. That's error of 5%. And we found, Engineer Chirchir, you almost got it right, but you are not very right. 157 megawatts of power plant. So that's what you call a virtual power plant. Of course, many years ago, 2006, when engineer was very busy in the sector, and Chirchir was in primary school, and I was, I think, in campus those days, it was a bit problematic for people to take up audits. So maybe I would understand where ERB, it was not even ERC those days, where ERB was coming from, because they used to beg industries to do audits for free. All the KM guys can tell you that, not the new ones. But you could beg an industry to allow you to go in to conduct an audit for free. But nowadays, now they are paying for it. So of course, it's been evolving with time. And that's why now energy management is becoming something that's quite of interest. On benchmarks, we only have two telco facilities, unless I don't understand what a telco means, but I know Safaricom, my first employer, and it used to be called Zain or Bati or Celtel. There are only two. I think we had another one that disappeared. It used to have purple colors. I can't even remember the name. Now that we're only having three. Yes, Airtel, Safaricom, and Telcom. Yes, Telcom. So there are two ways you can look at it. You can do the product-based benchmarks, where you're comparing Safaricom versus Telcom versus Airtel, that one. Or you do process-based benchmarks, where you are now benchmarking within yourselves. So you have the head of a unit in the call center at Jambo, JCC. You have another unit maybe in at the one that in Westlands. Then the one that is opposite, there's a church there. So you could be maybe now having units and say this unit, these are the benchmarks. Now when you meet your board, when the year ends, you compete against yourselves, because it might actually come that the process-based benchmarks are much better than product-based, because product-based are mostly averaging. It's an averaging exercise, but process-based is a bit detailed, it's a bit nuanced, so you can really gain more when doing process-based. But then, of course, for marketing purposes, we will develop process-based benchmarks at some stage. We are doing some study on data center, just in our department, which we call a faculty. We are doing some studies on the data center and energy consumption. So we would wish to explode that from that data center. Then we see if we are going to now relate to now the other telecom services with energy consumption. Thank you very much, Engineer Chirchir. I'll not answer any other question because I'm coming there to do other things.
We have heard, for example, from Ruth in the flower sector and on some of the technologies that are relevant for them. So could you please highlight what other standout technologies industries can leverage in order to boost the effect of energy efficiency?
Thank you. On energy efficiency, there's so much that people can do. Maybe just to point out energy efficiency, the simplest way is, it's the easiest way to curb emissions. So it's like the fast fuel. You don't have to spend so much. You can just start by changing the processes within, improving on what you have. For industries, you're talking about, you can include AI, in your processes. That's one way industries can leverage to improve on efficiency. You can also use, you can of course have the renewable energy integration. This can help cut down the cost, reduce the amount of energy used, especially if you're relying on grid or you're relying on expensive fuels like diesel. So that means, of course, emissions comes down and you're more efficient. And then you can also look at there is the point of efficiency. When you look at efficiency in the short term, it looks like the savings that you're making could they're insignificant, but in the long run, they build up. You start from saving maybe 1 kilowatt here, 1 kilowatt hour here, 2 kilowatts, but incrementally it becomes bigger in such a manner that we know energy costs are always going high. When you look at diesel, most of the time it's on an upward trend rather than a downward trend. Same to cost of electricity. It's almost always going high. So if you're efficient, it means you save more in terms of the amount of money you have to spend to procure energy, electricity for your purposes. So if you're saving a coin based on efficiency, it also means you have more reserves to invest in in making your plant more efficient, like in better equipment, for instance, because energy efficiency is more or less a factor of technology and, of course, human behavior. You can also invest in sensitizing your workers, ensuring that they know, like what my colleague has talked about. Most of the time, it's not that they don't know. You can actually utilize the power of, the sun during the day to pump, rather than that worker doesn't know that if I pump during the day, I'm saving energy, but they just pump probably at night, and that means using the expensive power that is available. So sensitization goes a long way in efficiency, and this is an aspect that shouldn't be overlooked. And it's also cost efficient. It means you don't have to spend more to actually be efficient. And sometimes some of the things that you can look at even in industries is lighting. We overlook lighting, and we almost always use lighting, especially indoors. In most industries, you find that they are in go-downs or huge installation of buildings, that requires a lot of lighting for the workers and the people in there to work. So you can also invest in smart technology to ensure that lighting that is not being used can use sensors to go off and on and off. And then there is, of course, heating and cooling. Heating and cooling is a big aspect of a lot of industries. And most people just keep on switching on electricity to cool their plants. And there is the aspect of using the waste heat, to use it as in form of heat exchangers to cool the plant. You can use waste flue gases, the exhaust gases from plants, those that use diesel. They can use the heat on those exhaust heat to heat water that is used in the plant. And of course, if the heat is high enough, you can produce steam from this heat that can be used as a process for processes within your organization. Those are some of the ways that you can use energy efficiency to improve your processes. And of course, cross-cutting issues like, of course, water efficiency. Are you recycling your water, or you're just using and discarding it? That, of course, boils down to, if you're discarding it, it means it has to be pumped out. And that pump is a factor of electricity. It means there is more consumption for you. But if you recycle it, of course, there will be pumping, but you can also use the natural flow, pressure. Just use pressure to recycle the water and improve your processes. So those are some of the recommendations, some of the ways industries can actually leverage energy efficiency to work for them.
So moving away from these easier measures to implement, the low-hanging fruits, there are the other measures that really require some intense capital expenditure. And one of the real questions is, what are the options on financing? What options are available to them? And as well as looking at how can these companies actually farm up the business case for these measures. So most energy audits, the investment grade energy audits, will have some indication on, this is your return on investment, etc. But how can the companies go about actualizing the project? As
The whole conversation that has been going on, I'm very happy that we already now have the Energy Management Regulation 2025. And of course, borrowing from what Engineer Chirchir mentioned, some of what we're calling heavy capex intensive energy conservation measures was one of the things that informed maybe the period of implementation to around 4 years. Yeah. So of course, as we mentioned, when it comes to implementation of some of these projects, within the project that I work for, Project Development Program, we understand that, of course, most of the C&I facilities are able to fully invest in the quick wins, yeah? Mostly because when you bring in projects on energy efficiency, they're actually competing with other budgetary allocations, and sometimes it's very easy to sideline heavy capex intensive energy efficiency projects, which have very high yield savings, and then they wait and they wait, and then 4 years are over. Yeah. So what we have done, of course, as project development program, we of course collaborate with the C&I facilities to be able to bridge that gap. As Kathy mentioned previously, we have had, of course, energy audits being done by the facilities, which is, of course, from previously it's a mandatory for designated facility to conduct these audits. Previously, there was no maybe provision for the financial aspect, and that made it very difficult for someone to take these projects and make them be bankable, or even take them to the investor. Yeah. So there are some metrics that are required, which mostly were not maybe possible within what you call maybe a general energy audit, which just maybe reaches up to have very minimal financial metrics. But with the new regulations, I'm very happy that the new audits that are going to come, they're going to give you value, and they're going to be more, maybe let's say, as Kathy mentioned, to create that business case, it's not just a matter of just a project is there. Yeah? So when it comes to investors, they are looking at quite a number of things. Of course, if you bring in a very low investment volume, energy investment measure, the investor might not find it's worth investment, but what has helped mostly is because you can be able to bundle some of these energy efficiency projects and reach a certain maybe volume that is investable and makes some good business sense. And that's why mostly when you look at now investing in the high capex solutions, and in this case I'm talking about like complete overhaul of maybe like chilling systems, complete overhaul of the standard efficiency motors to high energy efficiency motors, which is very high capex intensive, has significant savings, of course, but of course we're talking about almost about 5 years payback period, yeah, which is not very lucrative. But of course, in the end, they have very high energy savings. So, and also some of the projects that we have also seen that very have high capex and high energy savings is something to do with waste heat recovery. Yeah, look at let's say boiler systems. There's a colleague who mentioned that most people are using actually fossil fuels to actually produce some of the major utilities like steam. Yeah, so when you look at improving the efficiency of these systems using waste heat recovery, they are very high capital intensive, but they bring in a very high savings. Yeah, but now what you understand is now to bridge the gap between the high capex and also gaining that savings from the industry perspective. We as maybe like project developers, we also have to work hand in hand with financials. You know, we have to work together with them and let them understand where we are coming from. Yeah, and maybe something I can mention from Kathy's question is one of the major challenges that we've had, maybe acting as a bridge between projects and also the financing aspect, is an aspect of the risk. Yeah, so maybe from my side, I would say there was some introduction on what are the available financing options. And of course, ESCO models, now that we are going to enforce ESCO models, those are going to build a basis. And of course, as in the solar we have what we call the leasing models, has really worked very well. We also have the PPAs. Now what we're saying is in energy efficiency, we also have to be very innovative. Bring in what the first speaker spoke about, I can't remember the French name, yeah? Chauffage or something. It's more like a leasing model where you introduce maybe utilities as a service, cooling as a service. If you're producing maybe compressed air, you offer it as a service. But now you present it to a facility in such a way that they are looking at the benefits. They don't incur the main capex, yeah, but they benefit from the energy savings. But that's, of course, a long conversation going on. But I'm happy with the new regulations. More measures will be put in place to also safeguard on some of those aspects. Yeah, and of course, as I mentioned, maybe just to finish off, it's not very straightforward to of course finance some of the projects. It's a case by case scenario, and I believe that's a conversation that is ongoing. And of course, happy to of course support various facilities throughout the processes. Yeah.
So, engineer, thanks for the good presentation. My question goes to you. What policies and regulations are in place to encourage energy efficiencies adoptions in the CI sector, and how will they impact competitiveness?
I think my question also goes to Ignatius. So EPRA, of course, has this mandate, and I'm happy to see the energy audit cycle in the new regulations. But EPRA's mandate very much focuses on aspects of waste, of now more on the petroleum side. Now here we are dealing with aspects of these new different forms of energy. So does the new regulation basically look into aspects of the component end of life? So for example, with our solar panels, what happens to these solar panels, 10, 15 years down the road? So that we have now a fully circular system.
And my question is directed to Engineer Chirchir. We know that in this country, a lot of investors go out of the country, move forward machinery, and bring them in the country to do industrial development. And you're saying that you are now labeling domestic appliances, which I've seen in the showrooms. What are you doing as EPRA to ensure that the machinery brought in this country is efficient in its operations to reduce the cost of the products again and the cost of usage of energy? Thank you.
Discussion on efficiency. So I think we've had a robust discussion around the demand side of things in terms of energy use. But I was also curious to see if we could extend the same conversation to the supply side. As we all know today, we've got supply inefficiencies that affect all of us, especially from our supply. I'm happy Kenya Power is represented here. So we know today we are at losses going up to 23%. I know the regulator set an 18% target. So my question is, do we have a roadmap to come down below the standard, the benchmark in terms of being efficient on the supply side, and what are those measures we are taking, and whether they are realizable within a realistic time frame? An attendant question to that, and this is specifically to Kenya Power, from my user perspective, there is a consistent concern around, and it affects the way the cost of energy is felt by the consumer, where you normally have a maintenance window that is really extended, and it's usually throughout the country or throughout a region. What we've always asked ourselves is, are there options around the elongated period within which Kenya Power does its maintenance window? Is it even possible to split the maintenance window into frames that allow people to rely on more efficient backups other than defaulting to generator? Like, for example, if you run a maintenance window from 8 to 5, it definitely means most of the consumers will ultimately default to using fossil fuel. But if you look at most of the consumers, they could typically have backups that are running for 2 to 3 hours. Is it possible to time box maintenance activities to places, time zones that are convenient to the consumer, or at least that are off-peak from the consumer perspective? There's a lot of impact, especially speaking from the telco side, that this could have, because we naturally we do not have unlimited backup time from batteries. We always go back to generator. Generator has a lot of attendant issues, mostly related to cost, that we always try to avoid, but we never succeed in this because some of these windows are really elongated. We excuse the supplier when there is a national outage, but when there are planned events, our cry is always to say,
let's align our activities to what is also convenient to the user, so that you listen to the voice of the customer. Now, the third and the last question is around ESCO. One particular thing about ESCO is, I think there is a heavy dependence on bankability of the contracts that you draw with your between the ESCO partner and the consumer. And what we've seen progressively, based on our experience in the telco space, is that there is a significant alert that the financiers speak when they see the stringency of the service level agreements that ESCOs get pushed to sign with the people they are supplying this service to. And that almost renders most of the contracts unbankable. Is there a way the regulator, I've seen templates, for example, that the regulator has drawn for IPP contracts, for example. Is it possible to extend the same to this ESCO space, so that when people are signing contracts, they're able to remain within a certain framework that most of the time will have been reviewed generally by the bank, and then so it enables bankability of those contracts. It's a real challenge in this space, especially when the value of the contract is significantly high. Thank you.
My panelists, please feel free to comment on this question, but I will just put in some information as well from the perspective of Barclay and any other financiers. There are some facilities available that can say, let's say, de-risk projects. There's I believe the Africa Energy Guarantee Fund. I believe there's the Mana Capital and a few others. And there's, of course, there has been the framework, which probably our colleagues from EPRA or KPLC can mention, but around the Super ESCO model that is being backed by the African Development Bank, and how that could possibly assist in de-risking projects. I will then pass on to Fiona to see whether you have any comments. I believe there probably is another session that might address the questions around the supply side efficiencies, which I'm sure is a rather complicated dynamic, as well as maintenance windows. If you could please comment on those.
On supply side efficiencies, there is always room for improvement. There is still so much that needs to be done on the Kenyan grid to improve the efficiencies or the lack of efficiencies that you are having on the grid, because most of them are caused by challenges that most of them are unforeseen, let me say. And on the matter of off-peak maintenance, maybe to just point out, if you're comparing energy and telco, it's a bit different, because you see, when telcos are doing their maintenance off-peak, it's easier for them, or let's say maybe at night, it's easier for them because they then again have availability of power to do their maintenance on their equipment. But for the power grid, it's a bit different. If I'm going to do maintenance on a power line, say for instance, a transmission line that passes through insecure places in the wilderness, it's going to be very challenging to have it done at night. So it means you will have to hire security forces, probably do much more. If you have a lot of those transmission lines off at night, the challenges that arise from just having it off is not just on the consumer, it's also on the grid security. Can you imagine if one of the major transmission lines, say for instance, Nairobi North Suswa line, this is a major evacuation line from the Suswa complex, which we know very well that houses the highest actually generation percentage from geothermal. We also have wind. We also have Ethiopia. So if you have one of these major evacuating lines out at night, it means that much more work to ensure grid security. So in trying to ensure that customers are not out for long, then you end up causing more challenges for other customers who, for instance, were not affected. Having said that, there is also the fact that Kenya, being a country that has vertically unbundled, we have different players. We have KPLC, we have KTRACO, we have KenGen. And when it comes to maintenance, say for instance, a major equipment being taken out, all these other, because the chances of this equipment being taken out again are can I say slim, because it plays a critical role on the grid. So when you're taking out such an installation, it means you have to involve all the players. If any of their adjacent equipment are attached to this equipment that is coming out on maintenance, they also have to do their, maintenance. For instance, let me use an example of a line that we all know, or a substation that we all know, Dandora. Dandora is a critical link in Nairobi. If Dandora substation, for instance, I'm going to take out the transformer, that means I also have to consider maintaining the lines from Dandora to Juja. And those lines are critical. And also it means reducing some generation from the hydro. So KenGen can also do some maintenance on the equipment. And challenges arise during maintenance. You start off with a plan, but something comes up. Recently we had a maintenance of a line, a 220 kV line from Isinya to Rabai. And that 220 kV line, the challenges of long lines, of course, is high voltage, especially during restoration. I don't want to get very technical, but the short, to cut the story short, is when they try to bring back the line at the end of the outage, which is at 5 p.m., they had some surge diverters at the pier end. Unfortunately got destroyed. So this means you can't bring in the line until, because such diverter, that's a matter of protection for that line. So this line was out for a longer duration than anticipated, and it means customers were affected in terms of power quality. If we miss this link, the instability that was brought at the coastal part of the country was higher than anticipated, and customers kept complaining. But the team that was working on this line, because it's something that was unforeseen, they had to work until midnight. And when they couldn't solve the problem, sometimes all it takes is you have to take a rest and start afresh to solve a problem. So it's a point of improvement, truly. From my perspective, I think the utility can improve on ensuring that downtime is not prolonged, but some issues arise even when you're trying to solve other issues. Thank you.